We can officially start our masterclass session. First of all, good afternoon to all the audience, and thank you for expressing your interest to hear more about designing effective organizations. Before we head on to hear more about this, I just want to make a small announcement on behalf of HR World, because we know how important this topic is for all the HRs in order to tackle the transformation that we are currently going through. We'll be designing a course on organizational design in the next year. So be sure to follow HR World. We will announce this timely so that you can apply and, of course, participate the course on topic of organizational design. Thank you for joining this masterclass. Our main topic of the day is organizational design. As you all know, our guest today is Ivan Stefano from HyperOptic. Even after all the amazing sessions you brought to HR Week, we are happy to know that you're eager to share more knowledge about this. This topic currently sparked a lot of interest amongst our HR community members, and this is why we decided to have a masterclass to bring more attention to this issue. So we're happy to hear more from you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for supporting these knowledge sharing processes. And of course, whenever you're ready, you can start your session.
Yeah, first of all, hi. Thank you, Alexandra. Hello, everybody. Glad to be here. We had an amazing HR week, right? We heard a lot of great topics. I'm very proud of having invited Henry Mintzberg, Amy Cates, and Naomi Stamford, who shared terrific insights in the area of organization design. Primarily, of course, Professor Mintzberg was talking about different areas of his interest, but I think that organization design hit the topic. So first of all, let me give you a brief introduction of myself. I'm a seasoned professional, mainly focused on areas of strategy development and implementation, organization design, which is important for this session, process optimization, performance management, and business architecture. Throughout the career, I have been working in various industries like oil and gas, banking, gaming, and lately telecommunications. As of recently, my role is the head of strategic programs at HyperOptic, which is a British-based fiber network developer and internet service provider. Besides that, I hold a PhD in strategy and organization from the Faculty of Organizational Sciences, and I'm also a certified business architect, a certified performance management professional, and Lean Six Sigma black belt. So today's topic is related to organization design, right? To learn more about organization design. Why is it important? Why HR professionals need to understand organization design a little bit more. So just let me know if you can see my screen.
You can see your screen.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So let's begin. The title of this presentation is Designing Effective Organization. What does that mean? Well, it's not just about having organizations per se, right? We all have some strategies. All organizations have customers they need to serve. These customers have some wants, desires, wishes, right? We need to fulfill those. And we need to design an organization that will that will have results in terms of achieving those, right? So that's what it means, designing effective organizations. And I usually like to start discussing this topic with this ancient Chinese proverb that says, when the wind of change blows, some people build walls, others build windmills. In other words, changes are happening everywhere. They're all around us, in every segment of our life, of our social networking, of our business. But we need to adapt. So, you have organizations that are trying to enforce their strategies without adapting them to the changing business environment. On the other hand, you have a lot of very successful organizations that are basically adapting to the changes, and they are basically building the windmills. So they're using the changes to achieve their own ends, to affect their benefits. Changes are happening everywhere, as I already said. We have changing customer expectations because demand for new products and services is all the time. Companies need to produce and be at disposal to their customers 24/7 every day in the year. Then you have a highly competitive global environment. You will find entrants becoming competitors in almost every industry. New entrants are coming from other industries. Take a look at Barnes and Noble, who got Amazon as competitor number one. Take for as an example, I don't know, hotel industry. They got Airbnb, right? They got a lot of new competitors that have different business models, and they're competing very well. Take, for example, Uber or Cargo here in Serbia. They are very successful in competing with the, taxi industry, etc. So, highly competitive global environment. Product and service innovation and differentiation is happening everywhere. You get differentiated products and services in ever shortening time to market cycles. So you need to be more faster, more agile. Then low operational effectiveness and outdated operating model, meaning that you need to revisit your organization, you need to revisit your processes on ongoing basis, and you need to change very quickly in order to stay at the top. It's not just about getting to top, but also staying at the top. And this is the part we will discuss regarding this topic of organization design. Then, of course, significant leadership and culture challenges, because nowadays you need to adapt your leadership style and your culture to the very heterogeneous population within your organization, and you also need to take into account your clients, your customers. Then political and regulatory pressures, geopolitical challenges, changes in regulatory requirements, and opening of significant growth of emerging markets. So changes everywhere. Of course, when we get to technology-driven changes, you find yourself overwhelmed with different technologies, different sources of wisdom and information, and you need to understand how to pick the best parts and how to use them in order to enhance your business. So we can talk about digital platforms, analytics, big data, Internet of Things, in-memory computing, machine learning, etc. So a lot of different technologies, and we need to understand how to use them in a very smart way in order to achieve our objectives. And of course, I already mentioned this, but business models are under attack. It's not just about having different technology platforms and making changes into various industries. It's also about the impact of COVID-19, how COVID influenced and affected the way we are working, the way we are buying, thinking, etc. So it's a lot of changes. And of course, taking all this together, we realize that organizations must transform in order to develop and deliver a profitable portfolio of products and services. And this is where organization design steps in, right? Well, when it comes to organization design and understanding how organizations can adapt to these changes in the environment, we can think of several layers. And here you can see 5 layers in organization we need to take into consideration. So first of all, we need to understand the ecosystem, or how the work environment operates, meaning how does organization need to adapt, to adjust to the changes in the environment, because environment is basically an ecosystem consisting of a lot of organizations, and changes in these organizations and in their strategies are basically affecting the whole ecosystem. So we need to stay on top of things. We need to be alerted on all the changes happening in order to adapt. Then the level of organization itself. So how work is organized, and this is the focal point of organization design. So how do we divide the total sum of work that we need to deliver, to do, and how do we connect the dots? How do we integrate all these separate elements in order to achieve our objectives and realize our strategies? Then we have the level of the team, or how work is delivered. So, the question is, how are we going to develop high-performing teams that will perform according to the specific standards and expectations within the organization? Then, going further and focusing more, we're getting to the level of the leader, So this is the person who is leading the team, but this person needs to understand the strategy that needs to be transparent. And we will talk a bit more about that later. So we need to have a leader with right competencies, the leader who understands the strategy, but not only the strategy, also the organizational culture we're trying to build. And this leader is promoting the culture and enforcing the strategy. And then we get to the level of the individual, and this is the person who needs to execute the work. So this person needs to be able to unlock its own potential and help organization achieve the goals while being able to learn, grow, and develop. So basically, these are 5 different layers in organization we need to take into consideration when discussing org design. But of course, the focal point is on the organization and I would say the team level. So what is it that we're trying to do here, right? We, among the other things, we need to focus on understanding and design organization structure in order to achieve our strategies. So I already mentioned, but organization structure is basically how we take the whole work. So we need to do one piece of work, right? We're producing mobile telephones, or we are providing hairdressing services, or we're in the car business and we're selling cars. So we have this work we need to perform, right? But because the workload is so big, it cannot be done by one person. So you need to hire additional people. And then when you have more people, you need to divide the whole work, right? You need to divide the work and to allocate portions of this work to individuals. But that's not the only thing you need to do. Then once the work is divided, you need to figure out the way how to integrate all these pieces in order to have the whole process and in order to deliver your products and services. So it's not just about dividing the division of labor and dividing the overall work, it's about connecting. So when we're talking about org design and org structure, we need to always be aware of 2 things. First, how are we dividing the work? And the second thing is, how do we coordinate the pieces we got in order to deliver the products and services to the customers? So the purpose of organization structure is basically to support day-to-day operations. And this is the coordinating part I was referring to. But not just that, it's the one thing is, structure needs to secure day-to-day operations, but on the other hand, your organization is changing. It is adapting to the changes we were referring to earlier. So organization structure should support your strategy in order to change the organization. So basically, we're talking about 2 purposes. And then we're getting to the design of the structure. Okay, when we know everything we said, right, how are we going to design organization purposefully and intentionally in order to get the best organization that will help us and that will enable us to achieve our strategy and to secure the delivery of our day-to-day operations? So these are the things that are very, very important, and we need to take them into consideration when discussing organization structure, organization design, and all the topics related. So what is organization design? Is it just something, are we talking only about design of org structure, or are we referring to the wider topic? So I would say essentially it's the wider topic, because organization design is basically, understanding all the elements that are affecting your strategy and connecting, shaping, and aligning all these elements in order to achieve your strategy, right? So what elements are those? And then we can discuss the Cates and Galbraith definition of organization design, where they say it's a deliberate process of configuring structures, processes, reward systems, and people practices to create an effective organization capable of achieving the business strategy. So it's not just about org structure, it's also about other systems like reward system and other practices that will enable this structure to achieve the overall strategy. But keep in mind, when Cates and Galbraith are talking about processes and structures, when they say structures, they're mainly referring to how do we divide the overall tasks, right? The overall work. So we get all these tasks. And when they discuss processes, they're referring to these coordination mechanisms. So what we need to do in order to avoid silo structure in order to have the processes running through the overall organization, not being siloed. And we're going to be talking about that very soon, because that's one of the most prevailing ways of working in majority of organizations, and this is also the danger we need to avoid. So working in silos and then not being able to step outside of our silos and achieving the strategy. So let's take a look before doing a deep dive on organization design. Let's have a high level perspective on some of the principles and rules of thumb. So there's a lot of different things we need to have in mind before we start the designing organization. First of all, look at the 5 design principles. So these are driven by the environment, strategy, and operating context, taking a holistic view, focusing on future, intensive process resulting in fundamental changes, and direction is dictated by the source of changes. So these are like principles, and I will get back to them. I will explain them briefly. But on the other hand, you have rules of thumb, which is design when there is a compelling reason, then develop options before deciding on design, choose the right time to design, look for clues that things are out of alignment, and stay alert to the future. So these are design principles and rule of thumb we need to have in mind before starting and devoting more resources and energy to organization design. So let's start with organization.
We cannot hear you. Cannot hear you again. Did you mute yourself by chance? We can still not hear you. It's the same. We cannot hear you. Can you try to check your headphones?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's fine.
Sorry, something must have happened. Okay, let's get back to the
presentation, and
yes.
We can continue.
Okay. Can you see my screen? Yes. Okay. So organization design principles. First of all, organization design is driven, as we said, by the environment, strategy, and operating context. What does that mean? It means that when working on organization design, we need to be aware of different things in our environment, right? We need to be aware of the competition. We need to be aware of the economic situation. We need to be aware of all the major and smaller elements that are happening, because organization design is not an off-the-shelf solution, right? So that's why we need to be aware of the environment. Then we need to design the strategy, and then working backwards to operating context and to organization design. And basically that's what is called situational approach to organization design. So there's no one solution fits all, right? It's always adapting, learning, and configuring organization that is very specific to your industry, to your environment, and to your business. Then second thing is organization design takes a holistic view on organization, which is basically a system approach to organization design. What does that mean? Well, it means it's not just, a piecemeal work, right? It's an overall perspective, because when you change few things, you need to understand how these changes are affecting all the other elements in organization. For example, if you decide to create a customer-centric organization, right? And you're changing, at one point you decide to change the reward system within your organization, you need to understand how changing the reward system will affect the strategy, meaning, being a customer-centric organization, and how are you so basically how are you going to change your KPIs in order to foster this strategy and all the other elements. So it's not just about one or two things, it's about thinking holistically about the whole organization and how these changes will affect your strategy. Then organization design is focused on the future, not the present. So it's about where do we see ourselves in several years. As I said already, organization design is about enabling your strategy, and strategies are always focused on the future, not the present. So you need to make organization that will enable your future. As a consultant, I had numerous occasions I've met with different requests from the client side when I wanted to when we were discussing the organization design, etc. But in one specific case, I had a request that we need to design organization for the strategy they had like in 10 years from now, right? So it was a pretty vague strategy without giving any sort of very specific information of, it's not just about where we want to be in 10 years, but it should be also how do we get there. So their strategy was like a set of several very beautiful and long distance goals, but without any guidance on how to get there. So it was very difficult to develop and to work on organization design because you didn't have all these guidelines on how are we going to start structuring our organization. And not just that, I think that the 10 years horizon is a very long period, and you cannot, in current situation, you cannot think that far ahead, right? What I would suggest is always thinking on your organization design 3 to 5, maybe 6 years in the future, right? And that's where your strategy needs to be 3 to 5 years in the future, because everything above that, I think, is very, very dangerous, right? You always need to have your mission very clear, and they can stretch more than 5 years ahead. That's fine. But when talking about strategy and when talking about design, it should be like 3 to 5 years in the future. Then organization design is a resource intensive process resulting in fundamental changes. So it's not just about tweaks and small changes and focusing on one organizational units or on several organizations units, and then discussing their spans of control, discussing the number of layers in the hierarchy. It's, as we said, the overall endeavor and taking the whole organization into account, meaning it is very resource intensive and it takes a lot of time. It's not easy to design the overall organization. Depending on the size of organization, it can last from 2 or 3 months for smaller organizations, up to even 1 year for very large organizations. And when it comes to how do we approach designing organization, do we need to take this top-down approach or bottom up approach, meaning do you start with your strategy and then moving up to the highest levels of organization, discussing who is going to be directly reporting to CEO, and then moving to the lower layers, or starting from the process perspective, understanding the day-to-day work, and then moving upwards. So whether we're going to take one or the first or the second perspective, it depends on what is happening, what is the context of your organization design. Usually, if we're doing it properly, we need to start with a strategy, with your environment, and then moving downwards. But then again, if changes are technological by nature, or when there's significant changes within some processes, then we can always use the different approach, meaning starting from the bottom and then building your organization design, moving to the strategy layer. Of course, in reality, it's always a mixture, right? You usually start with a strategy, defining the highest levels of hierarchy, and then moving down. But then again, when you come to when you get to the middle of your hierarchy, then it's usually a good thing to start understanding processes and then building up, and then connecting the top down and bottom up approach at some point, and then go moving higher and lower, and then checking whether everything is correct. these are the principles, right? And then we have 5 rules of thumb. Design only when there is a compelling reason, because as I said, the design rests on making a strong, strategic, widely accepted business case for it. You need a lot of resources. You need a lot of stakeholders, or almost all stakeholders in the company, to approve it, to align on it, to provide their support, right? So it's very, very tough thing to do. So, and we will be discussing the challenges a little bit later, the challenges of organization design, one of those being, getting the support of everybody involved. Then the second rule of thumb is develop options before deciding on design, because once we understand what the strategy is, once we understand the principle of our organization design, we can develop several solutions, right? And all the solutions are basically achieving the same strategy. They are in the function of achieving the same strategy, but then again, it's about impacts. What will provide the better impact overall? So we need to have some sort of metrics, and we need, once we have the metrics, we map our solutions to those metrics, and then we compare, and then we pick the best possible solution. Choose the right time to design. Organization design process should be initiated only after the sense of urgency is established, meaning that only when the whole C-level suite understands why we need to change the org design, right? Once we have the guiding coalition, meaning we have supporters and they are driving this effort, we need to be very clear on who is the project sponsor. I usually advise clients, when it comes to organization design, the project sponsor should be CEO, right? Or if not CEO, then somebody from the C-suite that has a lot of power and that can foster this process. And only then we will get all the necessary resources at disposal, and then we can move on. Another rule of thumb is looking for clues that things are out of alignment, meaning that all the elements need to be aligned. In what way? Well, for example, if reward system, if our strategies, for example, one of the pieces of our strategy is to increase the overall revenue, and then you get like, let's take an example from the banking world, right? We have all these branches, and each branch is rewarded. Their KPIs are based on the number of customers within their branch, right? They're not taking into consideration the overall system, but their own branch. And then you see some sort of cannibalization where branches are, trying to take over the clients from other branches in order to achieve their own KPIs. And so these KPIs are not in alignment with the overall KPI that says increase the revenue overall, or I don't know, increase the satisfaction of your clients, etc. So you need to find for clues what things are out of alignment, and you need to attack those things first. Stay alert to the future, because even though everything aligned at the moment, and even though we developed this beautiful organization design and we started implementing it, right? Things are changing. The context is changing. The customer is not sitting idle. They're doing different things, meaning your strategy will have to change. And when your strategy changes, you will need to reassess whether new design solution is suitable for new strategy or it needs to be revised. Then, then how do we approach organization design? We have, in order to start with designing organization, we need to have an organization design model in our head or on paper, right? So we need to have a model in order to understand what components do we need to take into consideration. How do we shape those components? Is it just, do we need to take a look on the structure, processes, reward systems, people practices, as we already considered, maybe organizational culture, maybe some other things, right? So whatever we do, before we start, we need to have a model in mind. The good news is we have a lot of models at disposal. Some models are simple, meaning they have small number of components. That means that you need less time in order to understand those models and to do the assessment of organization using those models. But the thing with these simplified models is you don't have all the tiny details in place, meaning you will end up with higher level of abstraction, right? Because you don't see all the details, so you need to involve more into abstract thinking. and it incurs lower level of sophistication. On the other hand, if you take some complex models, you will have larger number of components, more time is needed, but then again, lower level of abstraction and higher level of sophistication is accompanying this sort of models. In this slide, you will see various models, and we talked about Galbraith's star model, and it's one of the mostly predominant models in the market, and a lot of consultants are using this model. We had Amy Cates, who and she was talking about her view on organization design, and she's one of the proponents of Galbraith's star model, of course, because she was an associate of late Professor Galbraith. A good thing with this model is it has only 5 components. It has strategy, it has structure, processes, rewards, people, right? So once considering organization design, you need to consider these 5 elements. You need to shape these 5 elements, and you need to align them, meaning each element should be connected to every other element from the model. Moving from left to right, we are finding more difficult, more complex models. They have more elements, therefore more connections between those elements, and they require more time when doing organization design. For example, Nadler and Tashman congruence model, because as you can see, it involves culture, it involves work, it involves various inputs, outputs, etc. It's kind of similar to Galbraith's model, but again, it has different types of connections. Then, of course, very widely used McKinsey 7S model. This is the model being used by McKinsey consultants, a model developed by Tom Peters, a famous author on this topic. And then again, you have more elements there. You have some so-called hard elements, which is strategy, structure, and systems. But then again, the good thing about this model is it recognizes more soft elements like shared values, meaning our culture, than skills, staff, style, etc. But again, all the elements are connected to each other. Then we're moving to some slightly more complex model like Weisbord 6-box model, and then probably the most complex on this slide is Burke-Litwin model. So, no need to understand and to know all these models. What's important is to, pick one of those and then use it throughout your organization design endeavor. And then I'm just gonna use an opportunity to play a short teaser on Galbraith's star model, and it can show you. It explains briefly what we're talking about, right? So let me just play this. You can see my screen, hopefully.
Yeah, even we can see the screen, but there's no sound.
Sorry. Yes, sorry. Need to. Yeah. Give me a second.
Mm-hmm.
How do you find your ideal clients between people? Introducing Lucia, the easiest, most accurate way to prospect. Simply sign up for free.
Give me a second. This right.
Yeah, back here. This is fine. Okay.
Okay.
Provides a defined goal. Organization to get us. Answers to these questions determine that we need for our strategy. Levers to adjust an aligned organization. Structure. How should we organize? What are goals? How should power be allocated? Uses the primary architecture of the organization. Structure is very important. It is a powerful but blunt instrument. Structure structure alone is not enough. Every structure creates silos or boundaries between people. Across these boundaries, we turn to our second level, process. Ways to make the organization. Decisions need to be made about how work flows between roles and how decisions are made. Management processes that link people together and create the right conversations need to be designed. Third, we need to consider metrics and rewards, which are often underutilized in organizations. Metrics and rewards tell people how they'll know whether they are successful. Business level, we need to determine how to measure success. Individual and team level, we need to create incentives that guide behavior to reach our goals. None of this is possible without people. Final lever is people practices. What talent and profiles are needed? What competencies do we need in order to execute our strategy? What HR processes and routines will build those capabilities and competencies? Ensure attracting and retaining the right people. We are often asked, why isn't culture part of the strong model for organization design? Culture is an important part of organization. It should be considered as part of strategy development. We suggest leaders identify what behaviors are most important in achieving our strategy. To work in our organization if we are successful. However, you can't design culture directly. It is an outcome of the way we organization. That's why we say alignment of an organization is what determines its success. The goal is to create an organization that brings out the best in people and makes it easy to do the work that will accomplish our strategy. Let's move on to the how of organization design. Designing organizations is complex and challenging work encompassing many decisions. To do it well, you need a process. At Gates Kessler, we use the 5 milestone organization design process. Begin by understanding the current strategy, the capabilities required to execute the strategy, and the current operating model. This knowledge then informs work of each of the 5 milestones. Milestone 1, business case and discovery, we determine what problem we're trying to solve, the organizational implications of the strategy, and the gap between where we are and where we're trying to get. From there, we can start our strategic grouping and integration work. Structure, process, together. Choose a basic structure that supports the strategy and begin tying the pieces together, intentionally designing the points of linkage across boundaries. We tend to do this work in a very participative way, involving people from across the organization. Really focus on the design of the organization design. Create and iterate options, evaluate them, and create prototypes that can be used and tested before we make final decisions. Once we're clear on our new organization model, we need great people to lead and staff and fulfill roles. Organization design isn't finished until the right talent choices have been made. Finally, we must determine how we will transition from our current state into the future state. Learning and adjusting as we go, realizing that organization design, like anything, is the ongoing work of the future. There you have it. Together, these 2 models describe how we bring the what and the how of organization design together with great success both with small and large firms around the world. Please learn more about us at gateskessler.com.
Okay, so I think this video showed in a better way, right? Showed in a better way how to use Galbraith star model. But this is just an overview of it, right? You need to do a bit more of a deep dive in order to do it yourself. But again, I think this is a great baseline for getting there. So as we talked already, it's very important to have a model, which will serve as a foundation upon which we can build our organization design endeavor. But then it brings us to some of the top barriers to organization design, and I think this research shows it's very, very straightforward. In a very straightforward manner, what are the the biggest obstacles or barriers to organization design? And let's just pause for a moment and take a bit of a deep dive on this one, because starting from left to right, you will see that politics or vested protecting vested interest within organization is like 20% of the overall variance of barriers to organization design. Then 18% is incomplete strategy, 16% is lack of vision of future strategy, and then you get organizational inertia, etc. So if you did Pareto analysis on this one, you would learn very quickly that if you just focus on politics and strategy, right, you would overcome a very big portion of the barriers. Then, of course, there are some other things like organizational inertia, costs, lack of consensus.
Sorry for interruption. Can you just bring back the presentation, because we currently see the video?
Okay, sorry.
Just start screen sharing again.
Yeah. Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yeah. Okay, you can continue.
Okay, so now you can see the screen, and as I said, so starting from politics, then incomplete strategy, lack of vision of future strategy, organizational inertia, costs, lack of consensus on decision making, lack of knowledge and skills on how to do it, and unclear top level processes and activities. So it's a lot of things, right? But again, if we had to focus on something, I think it should be like, first of all, strategy. Because every time I spoke about organization design, etc., and when you talk to people and start doing your organization design, it always revolves around strategy. And if you have not communicated your strategy very clearly, you cannot proceed with organization design, because everybody in organization must understand your strategy, and therefore, once they know the strategy, they can think of what do we need to do in terms of the capabilities, in terms of the structure, in terms of the processes. What do we need to do with those in order to achieve our goals? But remember, it's not just about setting objectives, because that's necessary but not good enough. When we're talking about strategies, we need to understand the initiatives, or how are we going to achieve those objectives and goals. So when we know strategy, right, we need to start making our design. So first of all, we need to define principles and criteria, meaning we need to understand the guidelines that will drive our choices and decisions in the future. Different strategies require different organizational capabilities, and therefore different organization designs. So it says, design principles and criteria are the guidelines for any decision regarding how to change the organization. They need to start with your vision, mission, and strategy, and the case for change, meaning why do you need to change your organization? Why is so important to start the endeavor of organization design right now? Then again, principles, then criteria needs to be prioritized, right? And then all the choices you make needs to be mapped to those criteria. And for example, I'm providing this here an example from the pharma industry. So on one hand, you have a pharmaceutical company that is in charge for developing novel prescription drugs, right? So this company will require strong research and development capability and an ability to build relationship with physicians. So with that in mind, with those principles in mind, you need to start thinking about what do you need to do in terms of other capabilities, structure, and processes in order to achieve in making novel prescriptive drugs. On the other hand, you will find a pharmaceutical company that specializes in selling over-the-counter medicines. So what does this company need in terms of capabilities? It needs efficient manufacturing processes and a strong consumer marketing capabilities. So, the same industry, different strategies, meaning different capabilities, meaning different organization designs. I'm just going to flesh out few design principles, right? And then we will see how these principles are connected to some criteria. So a lot of strategies, of course, means a lot of design principles. So for example, you can have ease of integration, lean organization, customer centricity, etc. So for example, if you want to build your lean organization, meaning the degree to which the organization can operate with a leaner structure with less redundancy and bureaucracy, meaning you would like to have your organization more efficient, right? That's one way of one of the initiatives within your strategy, then you need to build in this principle into your organization design. Or if you understand that based on your analysis of what's going on in the market, you've realized that you need to be more focused on your customers, then you can instill customer centricity as a design principle in your org design. And by customer centricity, we are referring to the degree to which the organization is equipped to focus on the specific needs of customers and align its structure and processes. A lot of different things: focus on innovation, growth centered, enhancing group synergies when we have like a conglomerate, right, or a holding company. And then, but we need to connect all the separate companies within our conglomerate, and they need to create some synergies between themselves. So with these were just some of principles, but then you need to figure out the design criteria. So for example, when you have lean organization as a principle, then you need to put some criteria, measurable criteria in place in order to further develop this design principle and foster your structure that will support this principle, and in the end your strategy. So for example, when you want to create a lean organization, you need to have as criteria, you need to have project management structure to drive operations. Then you need to have standardization of roles and processes across business units. Then you need to have continuous improvement roles added at central and unit levels. You need to become a low-cost producer, meaning you need to always search for excellence and trying to figure out the ways how to increase the efficiency of your processes, etc. So what does that mean in terms of your organization? Well, probably you will need those competencies, and in order to get those competencies, you will have to have some centrally positioned unit that is in charge for process excellence, that is in charge for continuous improvements, etc. So I'm just showing that starting from the strategy and understanding what the strategy is, you need to figure out your design principles and then build criteria within these design principles, and these criteria will drive your organization design solution. For example, if you have customer centricity as one of the design principles, then you need to think of several criteria such as customized products at a customer's request, then separate focus on services and products to retain differentiation and drive growth, right? Because you will need to adjust to needs and wants of your customers. So you need to have clear separation between your products, and again you need to have your product managers in place, you need to have your account managers in place, and you need to provide them a high visibility within your organization, because in customer centric organization, account managers, product managers need to be very visible, and they need to drive a lot of decisions. Augment regional sales teams, etc. So a lot of choices can be made out of these design principles. Again, if you want to focus on innovation, then you can say that one of the design criteria is segregation of new product development, focus on new technologies and alliances, develop new products faster than competitors, etc. So a lot of criteria. But then again, it's not just about principles and criteria. We need to be able to measure, right? So let's get back to those examples. So if we said one of the design principles is focus on innovation, what can be our metrics, right? So we need, first of all, if we're focusing on innovation, we need to establish a position or organizational unit that will be in charge for the whole time to market, for the overall time to market process. So we need to break down the silos, and we need to have this process clearly defined and led by one person, right? Then other design metrics can be time to market lead time, so meaning what the number of days or months we need from the ideation phase to be able to monetize the idea, or to be to roll out the idea on the market in terms of the product or service. Then group-based bonuses, cross-functional competencies, etc. When we're talking about increasing efficiency or lean organization, some of the design metrics can be organization structure delayering, because you need to have as less levels of organization as possible. You need to have a number of process improvement initiatives. You need to build in your Lean Six Sigma competencies. You need to have to implement the Lean culture, etc. So, again, driving from the strategy across the principles, criteria, and getting to design metrics. And once we get the organization design in place, you can see whether the metrics works, and where are you now as a baseline, and where will you be in the future when you implement the design. I'm just giving here a few examples on, for example, if we have a customer-centric organization, how do we need to shape all the elements and in order to combine them to get the customer-centric organization. In terms of the strategy, it means creating more value for the customers by combining and integrating advice, service, or software within the products and tailoring them to the specific needs of particular customers. In terms of the structure, it means that we need to think about organizational units and roles within organization that are related to, customer teams, relationship managers, account teams, etc. So we need to have all these roles and units in place. And again, they need to be very visible. They cannot be buried somewhere, deep in the organization structure. They need to be very, very visible. Then in terms of the processes, you need to focus on most important processes such as customer relationship management, solution development, product portfolio management, etc. In terms of the performance metrics, you can focus on customer spending, share of customer spending, customer satisfaction and retention, the lifetime value of the customer, etc. When thinking about the competencies and talents you need to bring into your organization and develop within your organization, then we can refer to employees working closely with customers. They need to be selected and developed to work cross-organizationally at the points of connection with the rest of the organization. Meaning we need to be very picky on who are we going to who are we going to select in terms of people in our organization, and how are we going to develop this talent. This is an overview of investigation or research done by Boston Consulting Group. They were trying to figure out, how our organizations stay at the top of innovations, right? Because this was a very long-term research, and what they found is you will find a lot of organizations at the top in one moment in terms of the rate at which they innovate, right? But then in time, a lot of organizations just slip, right? And they're showing this example of General Electrics that started at the 3rd place in 2005 on their list of most innovative organizations, while being ranked on the number 47 in 2021. On the other side, you will find companies that are like Apple or Microsoft or Alphabet, former Google, right, that ranked among the first 10 in 2005, and in 2021 they're still there, right? So they did not lose anything. So one of the most important things was related to organization design, right? So they said that only companies that were able to understand the most important competencies and how to make these competencies last for a long time, and how to produce the structure and processes to support that were the most, the most successful, and they had this longevity and managed to stay on top throughout the years. So now, going a bit more into a deep dive, what do you need to do? So what do you need to do in terms of the approach to organization design? So there's like five basic steps you need to cover. The first one is framing the organization design, and we talked about it, right? So the first of all, understand your external environment, meaning you need to understand, and this is where PEST analysis can be very useful. PEST as acronym out of political and legal framework. So you need to understand the political and regulatory situation within your environment and within your industry. The second thing in PEST is economic situation. So you need to be aware of, are we waiting for another round of recession, or there's an expansion in industry, and you need to set strategy having this in mind. Then, S stands for social and cultural aspects of the environment. So you need to understand the social aspects of your customers, of your environment in broader sense, meaning it's not just about customers, it's about your vendors, it's about your owners or stockholders, right? So you need to know their cultural slash social characteristics. Then of course the T stands for technology and technical part. So you need to take all of it into consideration, right? So your external environment, and then the second step is to understand and confirm the business strategy. So you need to put in place the business strategy in which you're trying to achieve some goals, and you need, as I said, you need to explain not just what you want to achieve in 5 year from now, but also how you want to achieve it. Then and then from there you're establishing your design principles and metrics, right? We talked about it in more detail. So you need to say, okay, if I need to sell more of my products, I need to be more customer focused, right? Like an example, and then this is my principle. So what are the metrics? What are the KPIs, etc.? Then moving to assess current state. So once you know the strategy, you understand the environment, you need to assess the strengths and weaknesses of the current structure and current capabilities, right? So with, on one hand, we have our principles and criteria, so we can map the current structure with those criteria and say, okay, this is not okay, right? Then identify functionalities desired in 2B structure, what it is that we need to build in terms of capabilities in order to achieve our strategy, and then understand the key gaps. So once we know what's good enough, what is not so good, right, and then where we need to be, then we can assess the gap in between and understand our roadmap on how to bridge this gap and build new organization design. But only at that moment we can start building our macro design, meaning we need to start building the higher level of our structure, or larger groups within our structure. We can start with benchmarking similar industries and companies working in similar industries, and we can also identify alternative structures on our way to achieve our strategy. Then we get to selecting the high level design, meaning on the top level of our organization, what are the key elements that we need to have there, meaning who should report directly, or which segments of work should be directly visible to our CEO. Does our CEO need to have visibility over our marketing part? Does our CEO need to have a very good visibility of our procurement, etc.? For example, if we're talking about a factory, I would say that CEO needs to have a very good overview of procurement. But maybe in the banks, right, in the banking industry, procurement can be found elsewhere, not on the highest level, but maybe somewhere underneath within the structure. Then understand the impact of high level design. So once we deliver this high level design, we can play a little bit with it. We can do some sort of as is, right? Not as is, sorry, but what if analysis, and see what would happen if we put this or this part, this sort of model in place or some other model in place, etc. Then within the overall value chain, we need to identify functionalities to outsource. Maybe it's not. Maybe we cannot produce or make a few things within our company, so maybe it would make more sense to outsource this part of functionalities. So this is something that needs to be taken into consideration when doing organization design. Then from macro design, we're moving into the detailed design, and discussing the organizational units, meaning first of all, how are we dividing the overall work, but then when with all these pieces, what pieces should be connected within organizational units, and then understanding how many people should be within those organizational units, which takes us to the spans of control and discussing those. And consequentially, then with spans of control, we're discussing the number of layers and the depth of our organization structure. Then, of course, identifying methods to facilitate units working together. This is what Amy Kate said, and how are we going to connect all these pieces together? What sorts of mechanisms should be put in place? Do we need to align? Do we need to Do we need to have only some sort of, direct reporting, like very strong vertical lines, or maybe we need to, maybe we can discuss some other elements of coordination, like mutual adjustment, like some sort of standardization, right? We can standardize our processes that are crossing the boundaries of organization, and with this standardization of processes, we're getting closer to the overall coordination, right? So every person in our organizations knows at each point what is it that they need to do, right? Because everything is very standardized. We have a lot of different kinds of standardization, not just the process standardization, but also standardization of outcomes, meaning the objectives we need to reach, or the standardization of skills, right, etc. So not going further into that topic. So then, with understanding the design of organizational units and methods of how are we connecting those units, then we need to get one step further and completing the design of jobs, meaning job descriptions. How do they fit into the overall picture? And then discussing the overall alignment between technology organizations and process architecture, meaning your operational model. Then, once we have completed our detailed design, then moving forward to implementing the design with, testing this new design, filling in the key position. This is where HR steps in and providing additional value. But of course, HR should have been present in all phases, providing appropriate training and moving on with other change management activities. So, this is only one approach to organization design. There are a lot of other approaches to organization design. I will just flash out the Deloitte's approach to organizational design, which is, on a high level, it goes, it's very similar. It has this decide phase, right? What is the strategy? What are the principles of organization design? Then moving to the design phase with macro and micro, right? The detailed design, and then deliver phase, which is basically the implementation part. So basically, this is the approach to organization design, right? A lot of steps, a lot of things to do. But again, depending on no matter what approach you take, the process is more or less the same. And give me just 1 minute, because I'm conscious that we're running out of time a little bit. Just wanted to flesh out that, once we're discussing the organization, the structure, there's a lot of parameters we need to take into consideration, right? So there's and you can see here on your left side, there's design of positions, there's design of organization units, there's design of lateral linkages. This, this is lateral flow. This is the coordination of all the pieces we've been talking about. And of course, this design of decision-making systems. So all of these things needs to be taken into considerations, right? You have job specialization, meaning, how are you going to divide the overall work and who is going to be in charge for what, right? So how are we going to do that? Then you have behavior formalization, meaning, we can talk about a lot of different things. How can we formalize the behavior within organization, and then training and indoctrination, etc. Then when it comes to design of org units, you have unit grouping and unit size, meaning which positions will be grouped in the same components, meaning, organizational units. And then again, how big is going to be that unit, and then again, we're talking about the spans of control, right? So how are we doing that? We have several tools in order to do that. But the most important thing when discussing the spans of control is you need to take into consideration the heterogeneity of tasks within the unit. So if you have more heterogeneous tasks, right, then it's a smaller, you need to have smaller, narrower span of control. If you have tasks that are repeatable and they're almost the same, then you can have wider spans of control. A lot of other things are coming into play when discussing spans of control, like the level of competencies of employees within your organization units. Because if you have a lower level of competencies, then a manager needs to be more directly involved in monitoring what they do on the everyday level. Then the span of control should be a bit narrower. other things, the amount of, the operational work of supervisor as well, because if this person has more things to do in operationally, right, this person can devote then less time to monitoring and supervising other employees in organization units, etc. So, this is regarding design of organizational units. Then when it comes to designing lateral linkages, we're talking about planning and control systems. We're putting this, we have management by objectives, we have some sort of annual planning, we have budgeting, we have all kinds of things in place there. Liaison devices. So how are we going to connect the work between different organizational units? We said, okay, we can standardize processes. We can have larger organizational units supervising smaller organizational units, and then enforcing, more cooperation. But then again, we have different forms of teams, steering committees, we have metric structures, right? Because, and this is what we're facing more and more, that one employee, have two or more bosses or managers, and his or her work is being allocated to more dimensions within organizations, right? I can be responsible, I can be working in marketing, right? And being sitting in marketing, and my boss is the head of marketing, but at the same time I'm working on project X, and I'm responsible to the project manager for project X, but at the same time I can be in charge for the market of East London, for example. And this is like the third dimension. So this would be like a three-dimensional metrics, right? So it's a completely different topic. How do we design and manage metrics organizations? And then, of course, vertical and horizontal decentralization. Basically, how do we allocate the authority and responsibility for making decisions within our organization? So just to flesh out all kinds of things we need to discuss and take into consideration when designing organization structure. And just to finish with this one, there's something that's called idealized design of your organization, right? And this was pioneered by a long time ago by CEO of Bell Laboratories. So there was this, like town hall meeting, all major directors were invited, etc. So the conversation started with this sentence: "Gentlemen, the telephone system of the United States was destroyed last night." So of course that wasn't the case. The case was the CEO wanted for everybody in the room to start thinking about new design of the overall business without having all the obstacles and prejudice and biases that we all have, right? So he said, okay, let's start from scratch, let's start from the clean sheet. How would the system look, how would our organization look like if we started doing it from scratch, right? So he practically wanted to remove all the constraint. Why? Because if we don't know what we would do now, if we could do whatever we wanted, how can we know what to do when we can't do everything we want? So basically, we need to put everything aside and start thinking from scratch. If we started building our company today, how would it look like? Of course, there are two constraints, right? You cannot put everything you want on the paper. The first one is technological feasibility. So you cannot use any you can use only currently available knowledge, so no science fiction in place, right? That's the first constraint. And the second constraint is regarding the system design. It needs to be operationally viable because we're not trying to change the overall environment. We need to make a system that is, feasible, and so meaning it needs to take into account the regulatory constraints, right? We cannot do anything outside of regulatory constraints. It needs to take into account technology constraints as well. So only basically these two things need to be in place. And when you have that, right, the overall idea is don't think about strategy, etc. Think about the end perspective, where you want to be in like 5-10 years, and then working backwards, right? Building your strategy from your goals, not where you are now and then trying to figure out what is it that you need to do in the future, but basically moving backwards from your goals going backwards to where you are now, and that makes it a bit more easier to design the organization. So just wanted to end with this sentence by Edward Deming, which says, he said, every system is perfectly designed to get the result it gets. So if you're not satisfied with the results, then you need to think about your organization design and where do you stand in terms of the alignment of all components, and how can you improve the organization design. I'm providing here some references and future further readings for you, if whenever you find some time for it. And yeah, basically that's it. Thank you very much.
Congratulations on such a structured and detailed presentation. It was great listening to you. Of course, we have enough time, and if we have a couple of questions. So if it's okay for you, I'd like to use this time to answer the questions from the audience.
Yep.
Let's go in order. The first question was, in terms of evaluation of organizational structure, what would be your recommendation? When should it happen, and who should be the one conducting this?
So it's a very good question, actually. So this is an ongoing process, right? The evaluation of organization structure should start with designing or defining the strategy, because when talking about strategy, you need to take into account not just, as I said, goals, but also initiatives. And when you're taking into account initiatives, meaning what is it that you need to do in order to get there, right? You need to take into account capabilities, current capabilities. Can we do that, right? And with current capabilities, you're taking into account the organization design. So, it would be great if we could, I don't know, if let's take say as an example, we're having like 20% of the market share in whatever industry, and we wanted to jump to 40% in 1 year. That's great, right? What is it that we're going to do? We will put, project X, project Y, and these projects will enable us to get there, meaning one project will be devoted to different, to having better promotion, right? And then the other project will be devoted to having better products. The third project will be devoted to having, to doing our day-to-day work more efficiently, right? But then, is organization ready? Who is going to lead these projects? How are we going to support these projects operationally, right? From which units do you need people? Does organization have this sort of culture that everybody collaborates, right, and are focused on the mission and strategy, or we are working in silos? So that's what I'm saying. You need to start digging into your operational model and organization design solution once you're discussing strategy. And how to measure it, we covered that part in a way when we said, okay, from the strategy you have these principles, and then you get to criteria, and then you have specific metrics. So what you can do at the moment, when you're delivering, when you're talking about a strategy, you can see how are you, how do you align with the current, what's your baseline in terms of these metrics, right? And then if you will see, and with these metrics, you will see where the gaps are, right? Where do you stand low in terms of what you're trying to achieve? So, starting from scratch, and then, revisiting the metrics and, doing the measurements once the new design is in place. So you can always compare the baseline when you started and, the new solution, the new design once it gets implemented, and then compare the two and see, if it made sense to do the whole organization design project or not.
Yeah, talking about the measurements, we have a similar question here. If a company would like to make an organizational analysis to see if there is a need for a change, what should the analysis look like, or which aspects should it cover?
Yes, so again, depending on where do you start? Do you start with the changes of strategy, and then it's very clear that you need to revisit the topic of organization design and the way you're structured, etc., or you're doing some sort of operational effectiveness exercise and wanting to utilize your employees and your processes in a better way, right? Trying to be more efficient and more effective. So I think I spent majority of time explaining how to get from strategy to organization design, but then I think this question refers more to the other way, the other approach of how to start from the level of processes. So when you want to increase the efficiency of your organization and redesign organization in order to support day-to-day processes, it's always good to start with some sort of process catalog or process framework, right? You need to know, where are your processes, what processes do you have in organization, where they end, where they start, where they end. What is the current organization structure? What are the technologies behind all of those, the structure and the processes? Meaning you need to start with your operating model. And that's where we get to the business architecture. So understanding all the layers, doing specific analysis of the processes of organization, etc., and then working way up to the overall organization design. What I would always recommend, start with your core processes, with your most important processes, map those processes, meaning activities, with your units, and then you will get this chart, right? You will get units and how the process goes through all of your units, and then you will see the overlaps, then you will see the rework, then you will see that you have this back and forth between some units, and then you can say, well, does this make sense, right? Maybe process should be streamlined in this part, etc. So, trying to overlay the process maps and org units, and then you will get like the first overview of what's good or maybe what's not so good.
Yeah, thank you. We have a similar question here, but because we already answered the part of revision of the organizational development, I'll just read the second part of the question. How to measure how much is it aligned with the current strategy? So this is another type of measurement.
Yeah. So this is a difficult, right? This is a difficult one. What we cannot, we cannot put a number and say, okay, our organization design is, let's say, 4 out of 5 in terms of achieving the strategy. It would be very difficult to do that. The best thing we could do, right, is to have sort of qualitative assessment, where are the gaps in order to deliver the strategy. Once you know the qualitative gap, the qualitative area, qualitatively, once you know the areas where the gaps are, then you can do some sort of measuring. Let's say, for example, the part of the strategy we want to put in place is to be more efficient, right? And, we need to have our processes streamlined, right? And we want to decrease our OPEX, meaning our operational costs. So we can say in the current model, we have, 6 layers of organizational structure, and the cost, the workforce cost is X amount, right, of something. Processes or end-to-end processes on average span over, 7, 8 organizational units, right? In the new model, we need to decrease the number of layers of organization, meaning we need to go through from 6, we need to have 4, like that's the top, right? So you have the measurement, are you successful or not, going from 6 to 4 levels, which will probably decrease the OPEX, right? Because you're losing some of the middle levels of management. You're not going to lose your operational level. You're not going to lose your top level. So you're going to lose some of the, mid management levels, which will drive costs down, right? But then what do you get? You get, widening your spans of control. So, then with wider spans of control, you can say, okay, average span of control was, 3 or 4, meaning you had 3 or 4 employees reporting to one manager. New span of control will be minimum 7 or 8, nothing below that, right? So again, you get these measures. And what I already mentioned, the number, the average number of units that, processes go through. So let's say we had like 7 or 8 now, the new thing is 4 or 5, because what we want to achieve when we want to increase efficiency, we want to decrease the number of handovers between organizational units as much as possible, because between units you have all these silos, right? So in order to be more efficient, try to squeeze it in a way and try to have as less handovers as possible, right? So again, you can put a measure on that. So you're trying to put measures on baseline for the current operating model and the future operating model, and you can compare that. It's very hard to compare directly to the strategy.
Well, as tough as it seemed in the beginning of the question, you still managed to give us a vivid answer. So thank you for this. Moving on to the next question, which relates to companies from Balkans. How complex can organizational design be for family companies, especially in the Balkans, knowing the resistance to change and technological advancements we're all familiar with when it comes to family-owned companies?
So sorry, can you repeat it? How complex can it be?
How complex can organizational design be for family companies?
It's more of a question, it's depending on the competencies of the owner, right? What we learned so far working with a lot of family companies is that entrepreneurs are very successful with startup and building this company until one point. Usually it's a clear functional structure where you have people working, for example, in marketing, in production, in transport, and all the bits, all the functional bits, and all of those people are directly responsible to CEO. Then with time, they put some structure in it, meaning they still have this functional structure, but only putting additional layers, right? So what you get in the end is very siloed organization. And then usually when it gets to some numbers of like 400 or 500 people and everything is siloed, right, then you get all these frustrations on how when we were smaller we were very flexible, more faster. Now we're so the complexity is rising. But then what I've seen from my practice is that usually people who were in charge for this growth and very successful with it, maybe they do not understand all the mechanisms that need to be put in place, right, to foster the collaboration and overcoming the siloed culture. So it's a challenge. They're not putting in place matrix organizations because it's a very tough one, right? I haven't seen a lot of matrix organizations within family-owned businesses. But again, when you get to this size of, let's say, 1,000 people or even more, you need to find a way how to change things, because you cannot have functional divide only, right? You need to consider other things like being focused on markets, being focused on products, etc. So it's not just about functional part; it's also about other criteria of departmentalization and But again, they're not coping very well with this increased complexity, right? So what they need. They need, first of all, to professionalize the management structure, meaning they need to bring in the professionals, because the way you ran your company up to one point is not the way you will be running your company after you pass that point, right? So you need qualitatively, you need to change things. You need to bring in professional management. You need to delegate more. You need to learn how to decentralize your organization. I think these are the most important things. There are few very good examples in our practice, but I think, unfortunately, this is the minority currently.
Okay, thank you. We have one more question. The changes in organizational design can often be rejected or not enough accepted by employees. How to overcome situations like this?
Good one. So we need to take into consideration that when discussing organization design, it's not just about discussing with C-level suite, right? It's not just that we need to align CEO, CFO, COO behind the idea, right? In the end, people on operational line are the ones who will have to work in this new organization setting. So what we need to put in place is a proper change management philosophy and process, right? Meaning we need to include a wide coalition. So it's not only that we need to have a CEO and the rest of C-suite backing us up on this. We need to involve as much people as possible. So they need to be involved from the beginning. They need to understand, first of all, why the current situation is not sustainable. Why do we need to change something, right? That's the first thing. Then the second thing is they need to understand, okay, the current situation is not so good, but where do we want to be, right? So they need to be involved in these sessions, in these workshops on figuring out what's the future model. What is it that the future model should look like? Not necessarily meaning that they need to figure this out for the whole organization, but at least they need to be involved with their teams, on the level that is very visible to them. Meaning we can discuss how do we need to change the way of workings within our own organization units, but we need to support the whole process, right? We need to provide our ideas, etc. Building on that, you are getting their buy-in, right? Because they feel as part of the solution, right? Not just that they are somebody who the new solution was enforced on, right? So they are part of the solution. So what I would say, it's a change management 101. You need to involve people, you need to communicate, you need to make them feel as they are as they're contributing to the new model. And then it's going to be much more easier when you design the new model. It's going to be a lot more easier to implement it because the resistance will be minimized, right? So yeah, basically it's what I said. It's something you need to do. You need to have with every project, with every conceivable project within your organization. You need to have change management, especially when it comes to changing your org design, because ultimately with changing the structure, you are changing the power within your organization, because maybe you're taking away few organizational units or the headcount under one executive, and you're giving it away to somebody else, meaning this person that got all the headcount increase, right, will be more influential in the organization in the future. And then people are resisting, right, because I want to build my own turf, right? That's like my individual goal. So I'm trying to do that, even though I understand that there is a rationale why I need to give away a part of my power, right? But again, we're all people in the end, and we need to take that into account when doing organization design, and especially when implementing organization design. So again, proper change management approach.
I'm really happy that we had this question as the last one in the session, because this is your answer was a great way to conclude today's masterclass. Congratulations on your presentation. You started really well with scanning the changes in the business landscapes. I had to write it down. I took some notes actually, because it was an amazing way to see how overwhelmed the companies are, and we are with all the technology solutions that we have today. And moving on to the video, where I saw that we see alignment as the key thing to organizational development effectiveness. And of course, in my opinion, the slides about design principles, criteria, and metrics as the most important takeaways for the audience today. And of course, all the answers you provided to the questions from the audience. So thank you once again. This was an amazing masterclass. And of course, I also hope that you enjoyed the hour and a half that we are here.
Yeah, I think it was great. Thanks for a great organization. Sorry for these technical glitches, but it happens, right? And the major point for HR community and HR professional is where they can contribute. Well, with defining those design principles and criteria, because they're the only ones in organization that can help C-level suite in terms of explaining what can we do with current talent and with current competencies within organization, right? So they are very invited to contribute in defining principles, defining criteria, building the metrics, right? Because once you have that in place, the rest will come and you will get to where you want it to go. But first you need to focus on the basis, right? And these are the bases. So I think that HR professionals should be more involved in the future in this particular part of strategy implementation.
Yeah, we'll be discussing this topic more and more throughout the next year. We started great this year. We are planning to do it next year. As I mentioned at the beginning of the course, we'll be organizing the course on organizational design. So, Ivan, thank you once again. This was an amazing session, and thank you for supporting the knowledge sharing that we are trying to do throughout our communities here.
Thank you once more, Alexandra. It was my pleasure. See you soon.
See you soon. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.